Welcome back to our channel. In this video, we reveal some of the most valuable coins in the world, coins that collectors and investors are willing to pay thousands or even millions for.
If you thought the humble penny in your pocket is just loose change, think again. Because today's story starts with something most people overlook, but a few lucky Americans have discovered can quietly change their financial future. Imagine holding a simple 2009 Lincoln cent with a small D mint mark and realizing it might not just be a 1-cent coin, but a potential 5, 6, or even 7-figure opportunity. Now, before you dismiss that as impossible, stay with me, because what you're about to hear has made collectors pause, dig through jars of old coins, and in some cases, walk away with life-changing money. We open in the world of modern U.S. coinage, where the 2009 Lincoln bicentennial cents were released to honor 200 years since Abraham Lincoln's birth. For different reverse designs were created that year, each telling a chapter of Lincoln's life. Millions were minted, yes, but here's where things get interesting. Within those millions, a small number carry unusual errors, misstrikes, and rare variations that weren't supposed to leave the mint. And history has shown us something important. When rarity meets demand, even a penny stops behaving like a penny. Now picture this. You're sorting through an old jar of coins, maybe something you inherited or forgot about in a drawer. You're half watching TV, not thinking much of it, when suddenly you pause. One coin looks slightly different. The strike seems off. The details feel doubled or misplaced. You shrug it off. But what if that moment of hesitation is exactly where fortunes are found? That is the emotional edge collectors live on, because in numismatics, doubt is often the doorway to discovery. Let's move deeper into the mystery of the 2009 D mint mark Lincoln cent. Some of the most talked about pieces in the collecting world are those with mint errors, off-center strikes, double dies, missing design elements, or unusual metal variations. While most 2009 pennies are worth exactly 1 cent, certain error versions have been reported in collector circles and auction listings reaching into the thousands, and in rare, highly debated cases, even far beyond that. You may have heard whispers online of coins being valued at staggering figures, even approaching the $999,000 range in speculative markets or private listings. But here's where experience matters. Extraordinary claims always demand extraordinary verification. Still, don't switch off just yet, because this is where opportunity becomes real. Even if only a fraction of those high-end claims are ever realized, the underlying truth remains powerful. Rare mint errors absolutely do command serious money. And in many cases, the people who benefit are not professional collectors. They're everyday Americans who simply paid attention when others didn't. Now let's bring in a reality check, but not the discouraging kind, the empowering kind. Think of coin collecting like fishing in a river. Most of what you pull up is ordinary, but occasionally, something unusual flashes beneath the surface. The difference between someone who walks away empty-handed and someone who changes their financial story is simple: patience, awareness, and knowledge. And yes, a little bit of luck doesn't hurt either. Here's a moment that might surprise you. Some of the most valuable Lincoln cent errors in history weren't recognized immediately. They were spent, stored, or ignored for years before someone realized their significance. That means the coin you handled last week, or the one sitting in a coffee can in your garage, hasn't been checked by the market yet. It's still waiting to be discovered. That thought alone tends to make people sit up a little straighter. And let's be honest, this is where excitement kicks in. Because unlike stocks or real estate, you don't need a broker, you don't need insider access, and you don't need a large investment to participate. You just need to know what to look for. A magnifying glass, a few minutes of attention, and the willingness to question what others casually ignore. Now imagine the tension building in your mind as you consider this. What if you already had one of these coins and didn't know it? That's the psychological trigger that drives collectors to check again and again and again. Not out of obsession, but out of possibility. Because possibility is where financial change begins. Let's slow it down for a moment and ground this in clarity. Most 2009 Lincoln cents from the Denver Mint, those carrying the D mint mark, are common in circulation. Their base value is still 1 cent. However, error coins are a different category entirely. Depending on rarity, condition, and type of error, values can rise dramatically in the collector market. Some authenticated examples have sold for hundreds or thousands of dollars at auction. And while sensational online claims of nearly $1 million circulate widely, those figures often represent extreme outliers, unverified listings, or speculative pricing rather than consistent market reality. But here's the key insight most people miss. You don't need $1 million coin to change your financial situation. Even a $100, $500, or $2,000 discovery from pocket change represents something far more valuable than face value. It represents awareness turned into advantage. Now I want you to picture something. An experienced collector sitting at a table, carefully inspecting coins under a lamp. Then contrast that with an ordinary person dumping coins into a vending machine without a second thought. The difference between those two actions is not intelligence, it's attention. And attention, in the world of rare coins, is often where profit begins. So here's the question you might be asking right now, even if you haven't said it out loud. How do I know if I have one? That curiosity is exactly what separates passive viewers from active discoverers. Because once you start noticing small differences, mint marks, doubling, strike quality, you're no longer just spending money. You're potentially finding it. As we move toward the end of this story, the message becomes clear. The 2009 Lincoln Cent, especially those with the D, mint mark, and unusual errors, represents more than just a piece of currency. It represents a mindset shift, a reminder that value is not always obvious at first glance. And sometimes, the most overlooked objects carry the most surprising potential. So whether you're holding a handful of change, a jar from decades ago, or coins passed down through family, the real question is not whether treasure exists. The real question is whether you're willing to look closely enough to see it. Because in the world of rare coins, fortunes don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they quietly sit in your hand, waiting for someone who knows how to recognize them. What if I told you that a penny sitting in your drawer right now could be worth more than a luxury home in California? Not someday, not in theory, but right now, on today's collector market. Because in the world of modern coin errors, one small piece of copper from the United States Mint has been creating serious attention. The 2018 D Lincoln Cent error coin. A coin so ordinary at first glance that most people would miss it completely, and yet so unusual in certain rare variations that some listings and collector discussions have pushed its perceived value into the extreme high-end ranges, with figures circulating as high as hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on condition, error type, and authenticity. Now, before you dismiss this as just another rare coin hype story, stay with me, because what you're about to understand is not just about a penny. It's about timing, awareness, and the hidden wealth sitting inside everyday circulation, quietly waiting for the people who know what to look for. And if you've ever thought, I probably don't have anything valuable, this video is going to challenge that belief in a very real way. The story starts with something most people would never consider exciting. The 2018 Lincoln Cent struck at the Denver Mint, marked with a small d. Billions of pennies are produced every year, and most leave no trace in history. They pass through hands, vending machines, wallets, and car cup holders, then disappear. But every so often, something goes wrong at the minting stage. A misalignment, a doubled strike, a die error, a planchet flaw, and suddenly, a coin meant to be ordinary becomes something entirely different. Now here's where attention usually drops in videos like this. But don't tune out, because this is where the real opportunity lives. Imagine a factory producing perfect, identical godless. Now imagine one bottle comes out slightly misprinted, with a strange double label or missing detail. Most people would throw it away. But collectors? They pay a premium for that mistake. The same principle applies here, except the stakes are significantly higher when rarity combines with demand. But experienced collectors don't react emotionally. They react strategically. Because here's the truth. Coin value is not random. It is built on 3 pillars: rarity, demand, and verification. Remove one, and the value changes dramatically. Strengthen all three, and you enter the high-end market where serious money moves quietly between collectors, dealers, and auction houses. And that brings us into Act 2. Let's talk about what makes a coin like the 2018 D Lincoln Cent potentially valuable beyond face value. First, mint errors. These can include double dies, off-center strikes, die cracks, or striking anomalies that create visible distortion. The more dramatic the error, and the more clearly it can be authenticated, the higher the collector interest. Second, condition. And this is where most people unknowingly lose everything. A coin that looks fine to the naked eye might be worth $1. The same coin in uncirculated, mint state condition could multiply in value many times over. And third, rarity of confirmed examples. Many coins are rumored to be valuable, but only a handful are ever certified by grading services. That certification is what transforms speculation into market reality. Now here's a pattern interrupt for you. Ask yourself this. When was the last time you actually looked closely at the change in your pocket, instead of just spending it? Because most people don't, and that's exactly why opportunities like this are missed. Let's bring this closer to real life. Picture someone paying for coffee in Texas. They receive change. A penny drops into their hand. It looks normal. It feels normal. It is normal until they notice a small irregularity. Maybe a misaligned strike. Maybe a doubling in the lettering. Most people would shrug and move on. But one person stops. That one moment of attention can separate ordinary change from collectible value. And yes, this is where urgency comes in. Not panic, but awareness. Because coins like this don't announce themselves. They circulate quietly until they're either discovered or lost back into the system forever. Now let's address something important, because you deserve clarity. Not every 2018 D Lincoln Cent is valuable. In fact, most are worth exactly 1 cent. The market is extremely selective. But the reason this coin has become such a topic among collectors is because of documented error varieties and ongoing demand for modern mint mistakes. And in the world of numismatics, modern coins are becoming increasingly interesting because they are harder to find in pristine condition over time. Every year that passes, fewer survive untouched. Which brings us into Act 3, the decision point. At this stage, you're either someone who hears this and thinks, that's interesting, or someone who actually takes action. Because here's what seasoned collectors already understand. Wealth is often hidden in plain sight, but only visible to trained attention. If you're holding older pennies, especially Lincoln Cent from recent years, there's a simple habit that can change everything. Look closer before you spend. Check mint marks. Examine alignment. Look for doubling or unusual texture. And if something stands out, it's worth verifying through a professional grading service before making any assumptions. And here's the part most people miss. Even if you don't find a coin worth thousands, the act of searching trains your eye. And trained eyes find value everywhere. Not just in coins, but in markets, investments, and opportunities others overlook. Now, let's return to where we started. A single penny, a small object most people ignore without a second thought. And yet, in rare and verified cases connected to mint errors and collector demand, coins like the 2018 D Lincoln Cent have sparked extraordinary attention in the numismatic world, with high-end valuations sometimes discussed in extreme ranges depending on condition and authenticity. So the real question is not whether every penny is valuable. The real question is, how many valuable things are you overlooking simply because they look ordinary? The screen fades again. A final sound of coins dropping, slower this time. Because now, each one feels a little different. And for the person paying attention, that difference is everything. You ever looked at a handful of pennies and thought, there's no way any of this is worth more than face value, and then later found out someone else turned one single coin into hundreds of thousands of dollars? So the question is simple. Are you holding one without even knowing it? Let's break this down properly, because what you're about to hear might completely change how you look at everyday pocket change forever. Now here's where most people make their first mistake. They assume pennies are dead money, that they stopped being relevant decades ago. But in reality, modern Lincoln Cents, especially those with minting anomalies, have become one of the most closely examined categories in the entire U.S. coin collecting market. And I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine dumping out a coffee can full of pennies on a kitchen table. Nothing special, right? But somewhere in that pile, one coin might be missing a mint mark, or have a subtle strike error, or a die variation so rare that only a handful have ever been confirmed. And suddenly, that junk change transforms into something collectors will aggressively compete for. Now, let me ask you something real quick. When was the last time you actually looked at your coins instead of just spending them? Exactly. That's where opportunity quietly hides. Let's talk specifically about the 2016 Lincoln Cent situation. In standard production, most U.S. pennies carry identifiable mint marks like P or D, depending on where they were struck. But certain anomalies, especially coins appearing without expected mint marks or showing unusual strike characteristics, can trigger serious collector interest. Now here's where things get interesting. In high-end numismatic discussions, certain error coins tied to modern Lincoln Cents have been known to escalate dramatically in value when three things line up: rarity, verified grading, and collector demand spikes. And demand, right now, is not just active. It is aggressive, because collectors aren't just buying coins anymore. They are hunting verified scarcity. And when scarcity meets modern production errors, you get auctions that don't look real to most people. That's where reports of extraordinary valuations come into play, including listings and claims reaching into the hundreds of thousands of dollars for exceptionally rare error specimens under the right certification conditions. Now, before you dismiss that as internet talk, understand this. The coin market has a long history of people underestimating modern errors until auction records prove otherwise. And by then, the coins are already gone. Let me interrupt for a second, because this is important. If you're thinking, "Yeah, right, I've been collecting pennies my whole life and never seen anything like that," you're not alone. That's exactly what most people think right before they discover one in their own home. And then the reaction is usually the same. A mix of disbelief, excitement, and a little frustration. Because suddenly, every jar of change starts looking like a missed opportunity. Now let's shift into what actually creates value in this space. Because this is where most viewers either unlock real insight or completely miss the point. A coin doesn't become valuable just because it is old. It becomes valuable because collectors want it more than it is available. That's it. And in the case of rare Lincoln Cent errors, demand is driven by a few powerful forces: modern minting curiosity, registry competition among collectors, and the psychological appeal of finding hidden wealth in plain sight. Think about that. People aren't just collecting coins. They are collecting the possibility that they might discover something everyone else overlooked. And that emotional pull, that idea of hidden value, is what keeps this market alive and growing. Now let's bring this back to the 2016 no mint mark Lincoln Cent conversation. When coins deviate from expected production patterns, even slightly, they immediately enter a category that gets scrutinized heavily by experts and grading services. But here's the twist most people don't realize. Not every unusual coin is valuable. In fact, most are not. But the ones that are authenticated, documented, and confirmed as genuine mint errors can escalate in value dramatically depending on collector demand at the time of sale. And this is where urgency comes in, because the market does not wait. Once a discovery trend starts circulating among collectors, it often leads to rapid competition, fast auctions, and prices that surprise even experienced hobbyists. So while one coin might sit unnoticed in a drawer for years, another identical-looking coin might quietly sell for life-changing money simply because it was identified at the right time. Let that sink in for a moment. Same coin category, completely different outcome. Now I want to pause again with something you should actually do right after watching this. Check your coins. Not casually, carefully. Because if there is one thing seasoned collectors will tell you, it's this: the biggest finds are almost never made in stores or auctions. They're made at home, in old jars, in inherited boxes, in forgotten collections that haven't been touched in years. And yes, sometimes even in the bottom of a car cup holder. It sounds almost too simple, but that's exactly why people overlook it. Now, let's bring this story to its final layer. Because at this point, you might be wondering, is this really worth my attention? And the honest answer is this. Most pennies will always remain just pennies. But the market for rare Lincoln cent errors, especially modern anomalies, continues to attract serious attention from collectors willing to pay premium prices for verified scarcity. And when you combine that with rising interest in tangible assets and collectible markets, the demand doesn't disappear. It concentrates, meaning the top tier of rare coins becomes even more competitive over time. And that's where the real opportunity sits, not in guessing, but in identifying. Because the people who win in this space are not the ones who wait for luck. They're the ones who know what to look for before everyone else catches on. So here is the final question I'll leave you with. What if the next coin you ignore is the one someone else would have paid thousands or even far more to own? That's the reality of this market. And whether you're a long-time collector or just someone rediscovering old change in your home, the opportunity is the same. It only takes one discovery, one coin, one moment of recognition, and everything you thought you knew about pennies changes forever. Because in this world, value doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's sitting quietly in your pocket right now. If you've ever tossed a penny into a jar without a second thought, what I'm about to share might completely change the way you look at loose change forever. Because hidden in plain sight, inside old coffee cans, inherited coin jars, and forgotten drawers across America, there are Lincoln pennies that are quietly making headlines in collector circles, with some reported listings and private sales reaching extraordinary figures, even as high as $795,000 in rare cases tied to minting anomalies and extreme error conditions. And one of the most talked about pieces in this category right now is the 2007 Lincoln cent error coin. Not every coin has this kind of attention. Not every coin has this kind of story. But this one has collectors, dealers, and everyday people asking the same question. Could I be sitting on life-changing money and not even know it? In the quiet world of coin collecting, where history meets precision and tiny details can mean massive value, the 2007 Lincoln penny stands out for reasons most people would never notice at first glance. It was struck at the Denver Mint, a facility known for high-volume production and strict quality standards. And yet, like a slip in an otherwise perfect system, a small number of these pennies reportedly entered circulation with rare error characteristics that turned ordinary 1-cent coins into high-demand collector targets. Now imagine this for a moment. You're in your kitchen. You're sorting change. Maybe you're half watching the news, maybe thinking about retirement, maybe just trying to clear out a drawer. And in your hand is something that looks like it's worth 1 cent. But in the right lighting, under the right conditions, with the right eye, this tiny object could represent something far more significant. Here's where things get interesting. The 2007 Lincoln cent becomes valuable in the presence of specific minting anomalies, such as striking errors, double dies, off-center strikes, or unusual planchet characteristics. These are not everyday variations. These are the kind of rare production mistakes that slip past inspection and survive into circulation, creating what collectors call hidden gems of modern coinage. And here's the part that catches most people off guard. Some of these error coins, depending on condition, grading, and rarity confirmation, have been associated in high-end numismatic discussions and listings with values that can climb into the tens of thousands, and in extreme verified cases tied to rare error combinations and pristine grading, even approaching extraordinary figures that have been publicly discussed in collector markets reaching up to $795,000. Now, before you dismiss this as just a penny, ask yourself something simple. When was the last time something you ignored turned out to be worth a small fortune? The real power of the 2007 Lincoln penny story isn't just in the coin itself. It's in what it represents. It represents overlooked opportunity. It represents hidden wealth sitting in plain sight. It represents the gap between what something appears to be and what it actually is in the right market. And if you're thinking, this sounds too good to be true, that's exactly the reaction most people have right before they discover they've been overlooking valuable coins for years. Let's pause for a second. Seriously, go check your pockets. I'll wait. Still nothing? All right, fair enough. But here's where the excitement builds. Collectors in the United States are constantly searching for these anomalies. Dealers are actively buying. Auctions are competing for certified rare error coins. And the demand is not slowing down, it's tightening. That's what creates urgency in this space. Because once a coin is confirmed, graded, and publicly recognized, it doesn't go back to being rare. It becomes hunted. Now, let's talk identification in a way that actually matters. The key with a potential 2007 D Lincoln cent error is not just the date or mint mark. It's the combination of detail, condition, and irregularity. The D mint mark from Denver is your first clue. But beyond that, collectors look for doubling in inscriptions, unusual spacing, misaligned strikes, or surface characteristics that deviate from standard production. And here's a pattern you'll notice if you listen closely to experienced collectors. Most valuable coins are not obvious at first glance. They reveal themselves slowly, like a story unfolding, like a secret waiting for someone patient enough to notice. Now, a quick reality check moment, because this is where most videos lose people. Some pennies are worth a few cents more. Some are worth a few dollars more. But a very small fraction, when verified and authenticated through grading services, enter a completely different tier of valuation. That's where serious collectors step in. That's where auctions get competitive. And that's where headlines about six-figure coins begin to surface. And yes, that's where stories of coins reaching staggering values like $795,000 enter the conversation. Not as everyday outcomes, but as rare, documented extremes that fuel the entire market's excitement. Now let me ask you something. If you found out tomorrow that something sitting in your house right now, something you've ignored for years, could potentially be worth even a fraction of that, would you still treat it the same way? Probably not. Here's where the emotional shift happens. This isn't just about coins anymore. It's about awareness. It's about timing. It's about understanding that wealth often doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives quietly, disguised as something ordinary. And for many people in the 30 to 65 age group, especially those thinking about retirement, financial freedom, or creating a more secure lifestyle, this is exactly the kind of opportunity that feels invisible until it suddenly isn't. Now let's move into what separates casual finders from serious winners. Condition matters. Authentication matters. And timing matters even more. Because a market for rare pennies is not static. It moves. It responds to demand, discovery, and collector attention. And when attention spikes, so does value. Imagine holding a coin that most people would walk past without a second thought, while a collector on the other side of the country is actively searching for exactly that type of error. That gap, that disconnect, is where opportunity lives. And now we arrive at the final realization. The 2007 D Lincoln cent error isn't just a coin story. It's a reminder that value is not always obvious. Wealth is not always loud. And opportunity rarely introduces itself with certainty. It shows up quietly. It waits to be recognized. And it rewards the people who take the time to look closer. So before you set aside that next handful of change, before you dismiss that old jar sitting in the corner, consider this. What if the next penny you touch is not just a penny? A key to discovery, a key to opportunity, and for a small number of people who are paying attention, a key to something far more life-changing than they ever expected. And that is why collectors don't just look at coins. If you've ever casually tossed a penny into a jar, a drawer, or under a car seat and never thought about it again, this story might change the way you look at every single coin you touch for the rest of your life. Because hidden in plain sight, inside ordinary pocket change from the early 1990s, there's a very specific coin that collectors and dealers have quietly chased for years. And not just for hundreds of dollars, but in rare cases for figures that reach into life-altering territory. Reported auction highs and private sales that have been discussed as much as $711,000 for exceptional error examples in top condition. Now before you shrug this off, ask yourself something simple. What if the next coin you spend at a gas station is not worth 1 cent, but closer to a new home, retirement security, or a complete financial reset. That's exactly what makes the 1992 D Lincoln penny such a fascinating and dangerous blind spot in everyday money. And yes, dangerous, because most people have no idea what they're holding. Let's start at the beginning. In 1992, the U.S. Mint produced billions of Lincoln cents at the Denver Mint, marked by the small d under the date. These coins were meant to be completely ordinary, circulating coins. Nothing special, nothing rare, nothing exciting. Just everyday change. They compete for them. Here's a quick reality check that might surprise you. Some verified high-grade examples of the 1992 D close AM Lincoln cent have sold for tens of thousands of dollars, and extraordinary mint state specimens paired with rare error characteristics have been discussed in elite numismatic circles at values that escalate dramatically depending on condition, rarity confirmation, and certification. In the most extreme cases, combined rarity and demand have pushed speculative valuations into the hundreds of thousands range, with figures as high as $711,000 reported in top-tier discussions around ultra-rare, certified specimens and unique error combinations. Now, pause for a second. Did you just feel that shift? That's the moment most people rewind the video. Because suddenly, this isn't about pennies anymore. It's about awareness. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of these coins are already sitting inside collections, jars, old coffee cans, and inherited boxes in American homes right now. Let's move into the second act of this story, where things get even more interesting. Because identifying one of these coins is not about luck alone. It's about knowing what everyone else ignores. Take a close look at a 1992 D penny. The date is your starting point. Then you check the reverse, the back of the coin. You're looking at the word America. If the A and M are close together, almost touching, that's your first major signal. But here's the twist that catches most people off guard. Not every close-looking coin is valuable, and not every worn coin is worthless. Condition matters, strike quality matters, and authentication matters even more. This is where professional grading services become the gatekeepers between interesting coin and life-changing asset. Now, let's break pattern for a second. If you're thinking, okay, but I've seen pennies before, they all look the same. That's exactly what keeps these coins in circulation for decades without being discovered. That's also why serious collectors quietly build entire portfolios around them. Because inefficiency in knowledge creates opportunity in value. And opportunity doesn't wait. Now imagine this scenario. You're sitting at your kitchen table, sorting through a handful of old coins. Nothing special at first glance. Then you notice it. A 1992 de Pennies. You tilt it under the light. The spacing looks unusual. You pause. And in that moment, you're either looking at 1 cent or something entirely different. Let's pause again. Seriously, ask yourself this. How many coins have you already spent in the last 10 years without ever checking? That's the emotional trigger most collectors never forget. Regret. But here's the good news. Unlike many opportunities in life, this one is still physically accessible. It's not locked behind insider networks or elite auctions. It can literally still be found in circulation, inherited collections, or overlooked jars. Now we enter the third act, the part where awareness turns into action. Because knowing about a rare coin is one thing. Finding it is another. But recognizing its urgency is where real value is created. The market for error coins like the 1992 D close AM Lincoln cent is not slowing down. In fact, it's tightening. As more collectors enter the hobby, and as online verification tools improve, authenticated examples are becoming increasingly competitive at auction. And here's what most people miss. Scarcity doesn't increase slowly in numismatics. It tightens suddenly. One major auction can remove multiple high-grade examples from private hands forever. One certified discovery can reset market expectations overnight. And when that happens, prices don't politely rise, they leap. So if you're holding on to old coins or you have access to family collections, this is where attention becomes advantage. Because the difference between someone who casually spends a rare penny and someone who identifies it early can be measured in 6 or even 7 figures. Now, let's bring this back to reality for a moment. You don't need to find the most perfect specimen in the world to benefit. Even mid-grade examples with verified errors can attract strong collector demand. But the key is identification, certification, and timing. And timing in this market is everything. Here's a final thought to leave you with. Every valuable coin story begins the same way. It looks ordinary. It circulates unnoticed. It gets handled, ignored, and forgotten. Until someone stops. Someone looks closer. Someone asks the right question. Could this be the one? So the next time you hear pennies clinking in your hand, don't dismiss them too quickly. Because hidden inside that ordinary sound might be one of the most extraordinary financial discoveries you'll ever come across. And in a world where most people are searching for opportunity in complicated places, sometimes the most powerful wealth stories begin with something as simple as 1 cent. If you've ever tossed a penny into a jar, left it in a drawer, or handed it over without a second thought, this story might make you pause and maybe even feel a chill of regret. Because what looks like ordinary change in your pocket could quietly be one of the most sought after Lincoln penny errors in modern collecting history. And today, we're diving deep into the 1984 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that has sparked intense excitement among collectors, whispers of life-changing value, and listings that, in rare cases, have reportedly climbed as high as hundreds of thousands of dollars, with some claims reaching around $812,000. Whether you believe that number or not, one thing is undeniable. This coin has captured attention across the entire numismatic world. So the real question is simple. What if one of these is sitting in your home right now? Now, before you dismiss that thought, let's reset for a second. Look down at your hand. Do you have any loose change nearby? Be honest, did you just check? That instinct alone is exactly why this story matters. We're about to break down the mystery, the rarity, and the emotional rush behind this penny. And by the end, you'll understand why collectors, investors, and everyday people across the United States are suddenly paying close attention to what used to be pocket change. This is where the story begins. In 1984, the U.S. Mint produced billions of Lincoln pennies. Most were struck in Philadelphia, which typically leaves no mint mark. That means no mint mark alone is not unusual. But here's where things get interesting and where the tension starts to build. Because within those massive production runs, something rare can happen. A subtle error, a misalignment, a die issue, a strike anomaly. Something so small it slips past everyday eyes, yet so significant that collectors decades later are willing to pay extreme premiums for it. And yes, this is where people usually lean in closer. Now imagine this. A coin that looks completely normal at first glance, but under magnification, reveals unusual doubling, misstrike characteristics, or rare die variations. Suddenly, that ordinary penny becomes a potential jackpot. But here's the twist. Most people will never notice it, even if it's right in front of them. Let's pause for a second. When was the last time you actually inspected a penny closely? Not just glanced at it. Really looked at it? If your answer is never, don't worry. You're definitely not alone. That's exactly why stories like this keep resurfacing. Because hidden in plain sight, these coins continue to circulate through everyday transactions, coin jars, and forgotten drawers. Now, the excitement starts to rise. Collectors have long debated the true value of rare 1984 Lincoln penny errors. While most are worth only face value or a few cents above it, certain exceptional error varieties, especially those in high-grade condition or with dramatic minting anomalies, have been reported in private sales and auction environments to reach staggering figures. In rare and highly publicized cases, some listings and speculative valuations have pushed into the hundreds of thousands, even reaching claims around $812,000 for pristine and extraordinary examples tied to unique error characteristics and collector demand. Now, let's be real for a moment. No, that does not mean every 1984 penny is a hidden fortune. But here's the emotional truth collectors understand. Rarity is not always obvious, and condition changes everything. And that's where the urgency starts to build. Because coins like this don't announce themselves. They don't come with labels. They don't sit in vaults waiting for discovery. They circulate, quietly, invisibly, until someone who knows what they're looking at finally stops and pays attention. Let me ask you something that might stick with you. What if the next penny you receive as change is worth more than your car? Sound dramatic, right? Maybe even a little funny. But in the world of rare coins, history has already proven stranger things have happened. Now, we move deeper into the second act, the turning point. This is where awareness changes everything. Once collectors understand what to look for, die errors, unusual spacing, doubling effects, off-center strikes, or subtle variations in lettering, the entire world of pocket change becomes a kind of treasure hunt. And suddenly, every coin feels different in your hand. It's almost unsettling at first. You start second-guessing yourself. You might even laugh a little. Am I really about to inspect pennies like a jeweler inspecting diamonds? Yes, that's exactly what happens. Because knowledge creates perception, and perception creates opportunity. And opportunity, in this case, can be extremely valuable. But here's the emotional tension that most people don't talk about: the fear of missing out. The idea that something valuable may have already passed through your hands without you realizing it. That moment when you think, I used to throw these away. That thought alone has pushed countless people into checking old jars, searching through inherited collections, and revisiting coin stashes they haven't touched in years. And now we arrive at the most powerful part of the story: the possibility. Because whether you're a collector, an investor, or simply someone curious about hidden value, the idea that a simple penny could transform into something worth thousands, or in rare cases, far more, is undeniably compelling. But here's the truth that keeps this grounded. Value is driven by rarity, condition, and demand. And demand for rare Lincoln penny errors continues to grow as more people enter the hobby and search for overlooked treasures, which means attention itself is increasing the value conversation. Let that sink in for a moment. Now we enter the final act. If there is one takeaway from everything you've heard, it's this: awareness is everything. Most people will never look twice at a penny for 1984. They'll see it, spend it, forget it. But a small percentage, those who understand what to look for, will treat it differently. They'll inspect it, preserve it, and occasionally, they'll discover something extraordinary. And this is where urgency meets opportunity. Because coins like the 1984 Lincoln penny error do not sit still in the market. They move through auctions, private collections, and estate finds. Every day, pieces of history are being discovered, and every day, others are being missed. So the question is not just whether these coins exist. The question is whether you will recognize one if it appears in your life. And maybe that's the real value of this story. Not just the possibility of money, but the shift in awareness. The idea that wealth sometimes hides in the smallest, most overlooked places. So before you move on, consider this your final moment of attention. If you have old pennies stored away, now might be the time to revisit them. Not with expectation, but with curiosity. Because in the world of rare coins, curiosity is often the first step toward discovery. And sometimes discovery changes everything. Even a penny, even a single coin, even a moment you almost ignored. If you've ever tossed a penny into a jar, left one in your car cup holder, or ignored the loose change at the bottom of your drawer, you might want to pay close attention right now. Because what I'm about to show you isn't just another coin story. It's a story about a tiny piece of copper that has quietly shocked collectors, stirred auction rooms, and, according to some high-end numismatic discussions, reached valuations that climb as high as $919,000 under rare conditions. We're talking about the 1979 Lincoln cent with the D mint mark error, a coin so overlooked that most people wouldn't even glance twice at it, and yet so powerful in the collector market that it has become a silent obsession among serious investors and rare coin hunters. Now here's the question I want you to sit with for a moment. What if one of these coins has already passed through your hands? Maybe it was spent at a gas station. Maybe it's sitting in an old coin jar right now. Or maybe it's hiding in plain sight inside a roll of pennies you never bothered to open. Funny thought, right? Or uncomfortable? Let's get into it. Act 1. The discovery that changes everything. Imagine this. A man in his late 50s walks into a small coin shop in Pennsylvania. He's not a collector. He's not an investor. He's just cleaning out his late father's belongings. In a worn-out envelope, he finds a handful of pennies. Nothing special, or so he thinks. But one coin stands out. A 1979 Lincoln cent with a D mint mark, strangely positioned, slightly off, almost as if it didn't belong where it was placed. The shop owner pauses. Then he leans in closer. And what happens next turns a simple inheritance into a six-figure conversation. Now, before you think that only happens in movies, let me stop you right there. Because this is where most people make their biggest mistake. They assume value is obvious. But in the world of rare coins, value is often hidden in imperfection. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny instead of just getting rid of it? Be honest. Most people don't. And that's exactly why opportunities like this still exist. Because while the world is distracted, a small group of collectors and investors are quietly tracking errors, mint variations, and anomalies that can turn 1 cent into a life-changing asset. And the 1979 D mint mark error penny? It's one of those anomalies. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Not all of them are valuable. Only specific error conditions, strike variations, and preservation states push this coin into extreme territory. And that's where things shift from casual curiosity to serious money. Act 2. Why this penny commands attention. Let's slow down for a second and break this down. In 1979, the U.S. Mint was producing massive quantities of Lincoln cents. Denver struck millions of them, each marked with a small d to indicate its origin. But during high-volume production, something subtle happened. Certain coins were struck with mint mark inconsistencies, misalignments, and in rare cases, die-related anomalies that created abnormal visual and structural characteristics. Now here's the part most people miss. Error coins are not valuable because they are old. They are valuable because they are wrong in a very specific way. And collectors, especially high-end numismatists, pay extraordinary premiums for wrong when it is rare enough. Think of it like this. If every painting in the world were perfect, a slightly distorted masterpiece would mean nothing. But in a world of mass-production coins, a distortion becomes a signal of rarity, a signal of scarcity. And in some discussions within collector markets, pristine examples of this 1979 D mint mark error variety, particularly those with exceptional condition and verified anomalies, have been associated with valuations reaching into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, with some rare auction-level speculation pushing figures near or above $900,000. Now, pause for a second. $900,000 for 1 cent. Let that sink in. Here's where I want to interrupt this with something important. Are you starting to feel that slight discomfort? That thought creeping in like, wait, what if I've already spent one of these? Good. That awareness is exactly what separates casual viewers from serious opportunity seekers. Because in this space, timing and attention matter more than luck. Now, let's go deeper. The true value drivers for coins like this include condition quality that borders on untouched circulation preservation, verified mint error characteristics that are documented and consistent with known die anomalies, and market demand spikes driven by high-net-worth collectors actively competing for rare U.S. coinage. And here's the part most people underestimate. Demand is not steady. It surges. One major auction, one collector rivalry, one featured listing, and suddenly, coins that were once ignored become headline assets. Let me ask you something again. If you had a penny worth even $10,000 sitting in a jar, would you even know it? Or would it still be sitting there next to spare keys and old receipts? Most people won't find out until it's too late. And that's the quiet truth behind rare coin wealth. It rewards awareness, not effort. Act 3. The window of opportunity is real. Now let's bring this into the present moment. Right now, the rare coin market in the United States is experiencing something interesting. More collectors, more online auctions, more verification tools, and more attention on mint errors than ever before. which means something very important for you. Coins like the 1979 Lincoln Cent D mint mark era are not fading into obscurity. They are becoming more searchable, more desirable, and more aggressively pursued by collectors who understand long-term value preservation. And here's where urgency comes in. Because while awareness is rising, so is competition. Every year, more of these coins are identified, graded, and locked into private collections, meaning fewer remain in circulation, fewer remain undiscovered, and fewer remain in your everyday reach. Now imagine this for a moment. You decide to check your old coin jars. You go through a few rolls from the bank. You take 10 minutes to actually look instead of overlook. And you find something unusual, something that doesn't quite match the standard design, something that looks slightly off. That moment, that's where financial stories begin. Not with millions instantly, but with attention, with curiosity, with action. And here's the reality most people don't hear enough. Wealth is not always built through income alone. Sometimes it's discovered in overlooked places. Now, I'm not telling you that every penny you own is worth a fortune. That would be irresponsible. But I'm telling you this. The difference between a 1-cent coin and a six-figure asset is often knowledge, condition, and timing. And all three of those are still within your control. So here's your takeaway. Start paying attention. Not to everything, just to the right things. Because in a world where most people are scrolling past opportunities, the people who pause, evaluate, and recognize patterns are the ones who quietly step ahead. And if even one coin like the 1979 D mint mark era penny is sitting unnoticed in your possession, then this might be one of the most valuable moments of attention you've had all week. Not because of hype, but because of possibility. And maybe that's the real lesson here. It was never just about a penny. It was about what you choose to notice before the rest of the world catches on. If you've ever dismissed a penny as just 1 cent, you might want to reconsider everything you think you know about pocket change. Because somewhere inside old jars, inherited collections, and forgotten drawers, there are coins that have rewritten financial futures overnight. And today, we're diving into one of the most talked about modern Lincoln Cent mysteries in the coin world. The 1971 Lincoln penny, with rare mint mark and alleged error variations that collectors claim could reach extraordinary values in the marketplace. Sometimes reported in headline-grabbing listings and auction conversations that spark debate across the numismatic community. Now, before anything else, stay with this story. Because whether you're here to sell coins, evaluate a collection, or simply understand what might be hiding in your possession, this is one of those moments where attention equals opportunity. An opportunity in the world of rare coins does not wait. We begin in the quiet aftermath of a coin being minted in San Francisco in 1971. The world was different then. No digital marketplaces, no instant valuations, no YouTube breakdowns like this one. Millions of Lincoln pennies were struck and released into circulation, designed to disappear into everyday use without a second thought. But as history has proven again and again, perfection in minting is never guaranteed. And when imperfection meets scarcity, value is born. Now imagine this. A simple 1971 South Lincoln Center, overlooked for decades, suddenly surfaces with unusual characteristics. A doubling effect in the design, a misaligned strike, or a mint mark anomaly that separates it from the millions produced that year. To most people, it still looks like a penny. But to a trained eye, it whispers something very different. It whispers rarity. And rarity in the coin world is not just desirable, it is often life-changing. Let's pause for a second. If you're watching this thinking, it's just a penny, that's exactly what most people thought before discovering coins that later shocked the market. That mindset alone has caused more lost fortunes than any market crash ever could. Now, Act 1 of this story is simple. Ignorance versus awareness. Most 1971's pennies entered circulation unnoticed. They were spent, stored, forgotten. But a small fraction, possibly struck with anomalies, began appearing in collector discussions decades later. This is where curiosity turns into obsession. People start checking jars. Old collections are opened. And suddenly, What looked ordinary begins to demand a second look. Here's the emotional twist. Fear. Not fear in a negative sense, but the fear of missing out. The realization that something valuable may have passed through your hands years ago without you ever knowing. That sinking question starts forming in the mind. What if I had one and spend it? And that question alone has driven collectors into garages, attics, and bank safes across America. Now we enter Act 2, discovery and escalation. This is where the story intensifies. Reports and listings occasionally surface online suggesting extraordinary valuations for rare mint-era coins, including claims that certain specimens of rare Lincoln cents have reached astonishing figures in private sales or speculative listings. Numbers that circulate widely and ignite excitement across collector communities. Some discussions even reference figures reaching into the hundreds of thousands of dollars for exceptional era coins in top condition, especially when certified by major grading services. In rare cases, sensationalized listings or misunderstood valuations push those numbers even higher in online conversation, fueling viral interest and speculation. But here's the critical truth that experienced collectors understand. Value is never random. It is built on authentication, condition, rarity, and verified demand at auction. And yet, even within that structure, the 1971 South Lincoln Center remains a coin that consistently draws attention because of documented varieties and error discussions that continue to circulate in numismatic circles. Now let's break attention for a moment. If you're still thinking, I'll just check my change later, ask yourself this. How many people said that about silver coins before silver disappeared from circulation? Act 2 builds tension because this is where everyday people begin transforming into accidental treasure hunters. Coin albums come out of storage. Inherited jars are finally sorted. And every small detail suddenly matters. The mint mark, the strike quality, the spacing of letters, the surface condition. This is where opportunity becomes real. Now we move into Act 3, realization and action. Because awareness without action is where most potential wealth disappears. The 1971 South Lincoln Center story teaches a deeper lesson than coins alone. It teaches timing, attention, and decisiveness. In the collector's market, hesitation often costs more than mistakes. Imagine discovering a coin that experts confirm as a rare mint era variant. The excitement is immediate. The verification process begins. Grading services evaluate authenticity. And suddenly, what once was a penny becomes a documented collectible asset with a traceable market history. This is where the emotional shift peaks, excitement. Because now the question is no longer, is it valuable? It becomes, how valuable is it really? And this is where the coin world gets both fascinating and unpredictable. Verified auction results, collector demand, and rarity classifications all interact to determine final value. While some coins reach modest premiums, others, especially those with dramatic mint errors or exceptional preservation, can reach levels that most people would never associate with a 1-cent piece. This is also where caution and credibility matter. Not every online claim reflects verified auction reality. But the demand for rare Lincoln cents remains consistently strong among collectors who specialize in error coins and early 1970s mint variations. Now here's the final emotional trigger, urgency. Because coins like these are not created anymore in the same way. They are finite, already distributed, and slowly being absorbed into private collections, grading holders, and long-term investors. Every year, fewer examples remain in circulation or undiscovered condition, which means the window of opportunity narrows over time. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Value often hides in plain sight, and the difference between a forgotten penny and a life-changing collectible is simply awareness combined with action. Before we close, remember this simple thought. Wealth in the coin world does not always come from finding something new. It often comes from recognizing what has already been in your possession all along. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you hear someone say it's only a penny, you'll know better. Because in the right circumstances, history has already proven a penny can be worth far more than a cent. Before you spend another penny, or dismiss that jar of old coins sitting in your house. This story might change the way you look at everyday change forever. Because somewhere in circulation, or tucked away in an old drawer, there exists a small copper coin that most people would never think twice about, a 1970 mint mark Lincoln penny. But here's where it gets interesting. In rare error conditions, this seemingly ordinary 1-cent coin has been linked to staggering collector demand, with certain examples reportedly reaching auction figures as high as $822,000. Yes, a penny. A single cent possibly worth more than a luxury home. And if that sounds unbelievable, stay with me, because this is exactly how most people miss life-changing opportunities by assuming they're too small to matter. Now imagine this, a retired man in the Midwest, sorting through a coffee can of coins, half paying attention, half watching television. He almost overlooks it, a penny like every other penny. But something feels different. That tiny D mint mark, a slight doubling, a detail so small it could easily be ignored forever. That moment, the decision to look closer, is where ordinary life ends and possibility begins. This is not just a coin story. This is a wealth awareness story hiding in plain sight. A slight doubling of a date, a misaligned strike, a mint markvariation. These imperfections, born from mechanical unpredictability, are exactly what transform an ordinary coin into a collector's obsession. Now let me ask you something. If you had a penny worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in your hand right now, would you recognize it? Or would it already be spent on a vending machine soda? That question alone has made many viewers pause their screens. Because this isn't just about coins, it's about awareness. It's about what gets overlooked in everyday life. And just when you think this is all exaggeration, the second act pulls you deeper. As coin collecting evolved into a serious global market, demand for rare U.S. mint errors exploded. Auction houses, private collectors, and investment buyers began competing aggressively for verified rarities. The 1970 Lincoln penny, under certain verified error conditions, entered that high-stakes conversation. Some versions display doubling effects known as double die obverse, where the design appears slightly duplicated due to a minting misalignment. Others show striking anomalies that make them stand out under magnification. And in elite collector circles, these subtle imperfections can mean exponential value increases. Now here's where urgency enters the picture. Because coins like this do not stay hidden forever. Every year, estate collections are sold. Storage units are cleared. Old jars are cashed into banks. And every time that happens, a handful of rare coins quietly enter the market, often unnoticed, often undervalued, and sometimes never identified at all. It creates a constant cycle of opportunity and loss happening simultaneously. And while most people are focused on headlines, bills, and daily life, collectors are searching. Constantly, methodically, because they understand something powerful. Wealth often hides in overlooked details. Let me add a quick reality check moment here. If you just glanced at your pocket change right now, would you really know what you're looking at? Or would you just call it coins and move on? That hesitation is exactly where opportunity lives. Now, in the third act, everything comes together. If you ever come across a 1970 Lincoln penny, the first step is not excitement. It's examination. Look closely at the mint mark. Study the date under good lighting. Use a magnifier if possible. Check for doubling in the letters and numbers. The smallest variation can completely change classification. And here's the part most people underestimate. Condition matters. A coin that looks normal to the untrained can sometimes carry hidden premium value if it remains uncirculated or displays verified mint errors. This is where collectors step in with precision, authentication, and demand. And demand is the driving force behind everything you've heard today. Not hype, not rumor, demand. Because when collectors compete, value escalates. When rarity meets demand, numbers climb. And when awareness spreads, even more people begin searching through what they already own. So here's the real question you should be asking. Not is this real, but what if I already had one and didn't know it? That question alone has turned casual hobbyists into serious collectors. And before you dismiss it as luck or fantasy, remember this. Every major coin discovery ever made started with someone deciding to take a second look at something ordinary. A jar of pennies, a drawer of change, a forgotten box in storage. It was never about the coin alone. It was about attention. So as you finish this video in your mind, don't think of it as just another story about rare pennies. Think of it as a reminder that value doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it sits quietly in the palm of your hand, waiting for the right moment and the right person to recognize it. And if even one coin in your collection turns out to be the one others have been searching for, everything changes in an instant. Because in this world of hidden value, awareness isn't just power. If you've ever dumped a jar of old pennies onto a kitchen table and thought, there's nothing valuable here, you may want to pause, because one of the most overlooked coins in American pocket change history could quietly change that belief forever. Today, we're talking about the 1967 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, an unusual error coin that has sparked intense attention among collectors and reportedly reached figures as high as hundreds of thousands of dollars in rare, high-grade, or exceptional error conditions. In some discussions in private sales circles, values have even been referenced approaching the $712,000 range for extraordinary specimens. Whether you are a seasoned collector or someone simply holding on to old coins in a drawer, this is a moment that demands your attention. And here's the real question. What if one of these coins is already in your possession and you just don't know it yet? Now, before we go deeper, let me ask you something slightly uncomfortable. When was the last time you actually checked your pennies closely? Not just glanced at them, but truly inspected them like a collector would? Because most people don't. And that's exactly why life-changing coins are still sitting in ordinary homes right now. We begin with Act 1, the overlooked treasure hiding in plain sight. It's 1967 in the United States. The country is in a unique transitional phase for coin production. The U.S. Mint is producing billions of coins, and in the rush of mass circulation, something unusual happens. A small number of Lincoln pennies are struck without a mint mark. Now, for the untrained eye, that detail sounds insignificant. But in the world of numismatics, that missing letter becomes a flashing neon sign of rarity. Most of these coins entered circulation unnoticed. They were spent on groceries, dropped into vending machines, and forgotten in jars and drawers. No fanfare, no warning. Just ordinary pennies passing through ordinary hands. And that's where the tension begins, because history has already proven one thing repeatedly. The most valuable coins are not the ones people protect. They are the ones people ignore. Now let's shift into Act 2, where the story takes a turn from curiosity into high-stakes opportunity. The 1967 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is not valuable simply because of its date. It becomes valuable because of condition, rarity, and error significance. In numismatic grading, even the smallest difference in strike quality, preservation, or production anomaly can multiply value dramatically. Imagine two identical pennies from the same year. One is worn, scratched, and circulated through decades of pocket change. The other is nearly flawless, preserved in mint state condition, with sharp details and original luster. To most people, they look the same. But to collectors, they are worlds apart. And here's where things get intense. Certain rare error varieties and exceptionally preserved examples of the 1967 no-mint mark penny have been discussed in high-end collector markets, with valuations reaching into the tens of thousands, and in extreme cases, under extraordinary conditions, figures reported as high as $100,000 plus and beyond. Some rare auction narratives and private collector claims even reference headline-grabbing numbers approaching $712,000 for exceptional, verified specimens tied to unique grading and provenance factors. Now, let that sink in for a moment. We're talking about a coin that may have once been spent for a loaf of bread, potentially carrying the kind of value that could reshape someone's financial future. And here's the psychological twist that most people miss. Scarcity doesn't announce itself. It hides. It blends in. It waits for someone educated enough to recognize it. So let me pause here with a simple question. If you saw a penny on your desk right now, would you actually know if it was ordinary or extraordinary? This is where excitement builds, but also where urgency quietly enters the room. Because every day, these coins are still being discovered in estate collections, inherited jars, and forgotten safes. And every time one is spent unknowingly, a potential windfall disappears without a trace. Now we move into Act 3, realization, action, and opportunity. The truth is, wealth in coin collecting is rarely about luck alone. It's about awareness. The people who benefit from rare coin discoveries are not always professional numismatists. Often, they are everyday individuals who simply decide to look closer when everyone else looks away. And if you're watching this right now, you are already ahead of the curve, because most people will never even know this opportunity exists. But here's where things become real. If you believe you might have old pennies stored away, this is the moment to revisit them. Look for 1967 Lincoln pennies. Pay attention to the absence of a mint mark. Observe condition carefully. Look for sharp details, minimal wear, and original surface quality. These subtle characteristics are what separate common change from highly sought-after collectibles. And yes, this is where urgency matters, because the market for rare U.S. coins is not slowing down. It is actively growing, driven by collectors, investors, and a global demand for tangible historical assets. Coins like these are not just currency. They are artifacts of American history with financial momentum behind them. Let me say this clearly. The difference between a coin worth 1 cent and one worth life-changing money is not always obvious at first glance. But it becomes obvious when you know what to look for. And that knowledge is where opportunity lives. So before you dismiss that old jar of pennies, before you assume everything has already been spent and forgotten, remember this. Some of the most powerful financial discoveries are not made in Wall Street offices, but on kitchen tables, in quiet homes, by people who simply decided to pay attention. Now ask yourself one final question. What if the next penny you touch is the one that changes everything? Because in the world of rare coins, the real secret isn't finding value. It's recognizing it before someone else does.